The world population is growing, and more people are living in metropolitan areas around the globe, where there's a greater need to create living space and build houses, but with consequences for the environment. More than a third of the carbon dioxide emissions worldwide are caused by the building and construction sector. What steps can we take to create a more sustainable construction industry? That's our topic today on Eco India. Hello and welcome. I'm Sanuta Raghu. For our first story, we head to India's desert state, Rajasthan, where we take a look at an innovative architecture project, a girls' school that was initiated with the help of a non-profit organization. Constructed using traditional methods and local materials, the building meets modern standards of energy efficiency and sustainability. At the same time, the school provides an important social impetus for the education of girls in one of the most remote parts of India.
Here in the Thar Desert, in the far west of India's Rajasthan state, it gets very hot. Temperatures can push 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. In the midst of this hostile landscape lies an almost space-age structure. It houses the Rajkumari Ratnavati Girls' School, where children from poor backgrounds are getting an education. The building is both futuristic and traditional. The oval form helps funnel air through the courtyard and at the same time is a symbol of female strength. For its US architect, the design posed challenges that she solved by drawing on local techniques.
I spent a lot of time there over about 8 years, and the more I got to know the people and I got to know the buildings, I learned more and more about the sophisticated elements of engineering that went into being able to build in sand, which is no small feat. It's always shifting, it's always changing. And also to have the walls and the structure be able to withstand the heat and keep the buildings, cool or cooler was sort of my objective.
Many of the traditional techniques that Kellogg turned to are methods that have been practiced here for centuries and have stood the test of time in an unforgiving climate. Inside the school, there are no energy-guzzling air conditioners, yet it's at least 10 degrees cooler than outdoors. In the winters, the building traps hot air to keep classrooms warm. Some 40 kilometers away lies the fortress city of Jaisalmer. Known as the Golden City, its historical buildings are constructed from yellow sandstone that glows in the sunlight. Diana Kellogg discovered the local material was ideal for her design.
The sandstone actually has an inherent thermal value. There's an outside layer, and then there's kind of a softer inner layer, which almost acts as an air cavity, and then another interior layer. In addition, we used lime plaster, which is a natural cooling element, which helps to lower the temperatures.
As important as local materials were local craftspeople. The building features jallis, lattice stonework, which keeps out the sand and lets light and air in. Solar panels provide enough power to cover all of the school's electrical needs. To help keep classrooms cool, the roof is covered with recycled tiles that reflect sunlight. With its use of traditional building techniques, the project aims to improve lives in the community. Associate architect Ria Bissa worked closely with the artisans.
The windows at a height avoids the direct sunlight into the room, which heats up the room, but it gives us enough diffuse light which helps the children to read in a natural light. We have all the furniture being made by the local carpenters, and we also have this nice lampshade which is done by a craftsman from Jaisalmer. So every material in the school is being made by all the local carpenters and craftsmen.
The Rajkumari Ratnavati Girls' School was built within a time frame of just 10 months. Its solar panel canopy doesn't just provide power, but also much needed shade, a place for students to play while sheltering from the heat. Throughout the school, spouts harvest rainwater, an ancient technique no longer used in many parts of India. In the courtyard, 2 trees preserved during construction offer a habitat for bees and birds. The project was launched by the Cheetah Foundation India. The whole vision for the school was conceived by Michael Daub, a US artist who has been coming to Jaisalmer for the last 20 years. It was his dream to open a girls' school here. The conservative state of Rajasthan has India's lowest female literacy rate. The desperately poor villages around Jaisalmer and close to Pakistan have been particularly behind on women's education.
We have schools all over the district, even at the border villages, but we don't have teachers going there. And the teachers get paid more than what we are paying our teachers at school right now. And the infrastructure is there, but the implementation is not being taken care of. So that's a problem all over India.
Asha Joshi has been teaching English here since the school opened in July 2021. Just over 100 girls streamed through its doors then, an achievement in itself. People in Rajasthan have long been sceptical about girls' education. It's typical for poor parents to send their daughters out to earn money instead. Joshi says persuading them to send their daughters to school is paying off.
If a girl comes here to study today, after 10 years, she could become a teacher in her local community. Today, these girls come to school regularly, and when we see them talking openly with guests and visitors, we feel happy that we have done something positive for them.
Sayanti is a farmer. Like almost half of the women and girls in Rajasthan, she's never had any formal education, but she's full of hope for her daughter.
In school, they get to study well. They get proper food. They get good food free of charge. When Vasundhara grows up, I hope she gets a good job.
Most of the pupils are from homes like Vasundhara's. They'll attend classes at the school until at least the 10th grade, receiving an education that will help them earn a livelihood. And surrounded by architecture that's not only climate resilient, but that's willing them to dream big.
It's the material that literally holds our buildings and thus our civilization together. Concrete. It's been used since ancient times. However, its production is anything but environmentally friendly. Given the effects on global warming, something has to change. But how sustainable can concrete really be? And what are the alternatives? Our reporter took a look.
The temple you're looking at survived longer than the civilization that built it. Even through barbarian invasions and the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Pantheon is still standing after nearly 2,000 years. That's because of the super material here, concrete. It's simple, it's strong, it's cheap, and it lasts long. Across the world, concrete has become the foundation of modern cities and high living standards. But it's also a climate killer. The cement and concrete industry is responsible for about 8% of the world's carbon pollution. And even though it's all around us, we don't talk about it nearly enough. So how can we make concrete clean? How can we build cities without destroying the planet? The ancient Romans were master engineers. They made a special mortar out of wet lime and volcanic ash, which they used to bind small stones and bricks. They used it to build some of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. But when the Roman Empire fell, so did these secrets of making volcanic concrete. It wasn't until the 19th century that English bricklayer Joseph Aspdin invented Portland cement, a fine powder made by heating limestone and clay in a kiln and grinding it down to a powder. This was the precursor to the modern cement industry. Soon concrete was at the heart of a global construction boom of everything from cities and houses to roads and dams. But the concrete we use today isn't fundamentally that different from what the Romans had. It's still made of just a few key ingredients: cement, water, and cheap filler rocks like sand and gravel. The cement is what gives concrete both its incredible strength and toxic emissions. At super high heat, the calcium carbonate of the limestone and silicon dioxide of the clay join to form strong calcium silicates. But the reaction also releases carbon dioxide that heats the planet. The calcium and silicon ions in the silicates dissociate when cement is added to water. As the mixture dries, these form crystals that fill gaps and glue material tightly together. By mixing cement with sand and gravel, you can make what is essentially a strong, durable, artificial rock for very little money. And that's why this ancient invention is now the most widely used material in the world after water. The concrete industry expects emissions will rise from 2.5 gigatons per year to 3.8 by 2050. They actually need to go down to zero to stop the planet heating. But the emissions from concrete are hard to get rid of. It's not just the carbon dioxide from the chemical reaction we saw earlier. It's also because manufacturers burn fossil fuels to heat kilns to the 1,400 degrees Celsius they need to break down the components. All that means making 1 ton of concrete releases more than 600 kilograms of carbon dioxide into the air.
It is incredibly carbon intensive, it is a definite problem, and yet we probably will continue consuming more of it.
This is Joanna Lehner, an expert in decarbonising industry at the environmental think tank E3G. She says cement is harder to fix than pollution from, say, cars or coal plants.
You can't simply make sure that your energy consumption is more efficient. You can't simply change the fuels that you use. There is a fundamental technical challenge.
But wait. If concrete is so hard to make without hurting the climate, shouldn't we just stop using it altogether? Well, first of all, the rich world has been building with concrete for more than a century. People in lower income countries have a right to build affordable housing and infrastructure that can stay strong in the face of extreme weather. But the second problem is that alternatives to concrete aren't necessarily better. In some parts of the world, sustainably sourced timber has a huge potential to replace concrete and store carbon dioxide at the same time. But building entire cities out of trees would put too much pressure on forests that are already struggling.
Concrete is not a problem, concrete is actually the solution.
This is Jorge de Brito, a civil engineering professor at the University of Lisbon.
Most people think that concrete has a huge impact on the environment, and they are right. But concrete has that impact because it is the most used material.
So, if concrete is really here to stay, then how exactly can we make it green? In October 2021, the industry took a huge step forward and unveiled its plan for doing just that. A big chunk of the savings by 2050 basically boiled down to efficiency. For instance, 11% comes from industrializing the process of making concrete. Then there's things like heating kilns with alternative fuels, perhaps from burning rubbish in waste incineration plants, or making cement with leftover material from steel and coal plants. It also includes some carbon dioxide that concrete naturally absorbs over time. It's a process the construction industry could speed up by recycling crushed concrete from old buildings and injecting it with CO2. Another 22% of the planned savings come from designing more efficient buildings and extending their lifetimes. Now, this isn't entirely in the hands of the cement industry. It's also about how architects and engineers design our cities. They could retrofit old buildings instead of knocking them down and design new ones to last longer. Just like the Romans did. The Pantheon went from a pagan temple to a Christian church. But the big question mark is the final third, capturing carbon dioxide after it's emitted and then storing it. The technology broadly exists in plants like this, just not cheaply or at scale. So can the industry guarantee that enough carbon will be captured by 2050, when the first trials in cement plants are only just happening now?
The thing is that in the next 10 years, we have to, as you said, make that technology mature and prove the industrial scalability and the commercial scalability of that technology.
This is Thomas Guillot, CEO of the cement industry lobby group that authored the roadmap. By the end of the decade, they want 10 cement plants fully equipped to capture carbon for reuse or storage.
It's not something that will be easy. I mean, we need to commit, we need to work on it. That's why we call in particular government and other actors of the value chain to help us and to embrace that initiative to really make it work.
But despite putting on a green face in its advertising, the concrete industry has not yet made detailed commitments as to how it will stop polluting. It says that will come later in the year.
Now what we want to do is really to walk the talk, or to transform commitment in actions, global vision into local requirements.
Experts say a big part of the solution would be incentivizing the industry to change by taxing carbon and subsidizing emerging technology. But because cement is so profitable and alternatives are still in the early stages of development, governments would need to push it along the right track.
It is a very capital-intensive sector. It is a sector that is very conservative, that has been very reluctant to move in the past, hasn't faced a lot of policy pressure. People don't really think about it. This is also part of it being hard to abate.
There are already pockets of good news. A British company has successfully captured CO2 from a cement plant in France and turned it into materials that can be used in construction. In Sweden, a pilot study has shown cement can technically be made out of electricity without using fossil fuels, though this would also mean even more demand for clean energy. In Norway, a cement factory is set to open a carbon capture facility in 2024 that should single-handedly halve the plant's emissions. The common thread behind all these solutions is making low-carbon concrete cheaper, and that takes policies, investment, and research.
The average consumer doesn't think about their cement and concrete consumption. The place where those decisions sit are really with governments.
That doesn't mean you don't have a voice. Sure, you can't choose how much concrete is in your home, but the more attention the cement industry gets, the more pressure it'll face to go green.
To find greener building materials and move away from concrete, it's worth looking back to ancient construction techniques. That's the idea, followed by an architect who works on his projects mainly in Tamil Nadu. He uses natural materials like loam and limestone to build his eco-friendly homes.
These walls can breathe. Yes, you heard that right. Indian cities are strewn with concrete and cement buildings. But some architects are trying more eco-friendly or sustainable alternatives. Ayanar is an architect from Tamil Nadu, and he's trying something different. To build houses with clay, limestone, gravelstone, and rocks.
People think that cement has to be the main component of a building. But cement is actually very wasteful. It's produced after exploiting a lot of natural resources from the earth and water. In the end, we can't recycle cement either. So I decided to keep the cement in my projects to a minimum.
What makes Ayanar's construction different is that his houses let in cool air and keep the humidity under control. Even when the outside temperature is hot, according to its new residents, the building remains cool.
This type of construction affects the way the building is insulated.
The building itself will be insulated.
We have seen that when the temperature outside is cool, it is totally the opposite inside. And when it's really hot, it's cool inside our home. And that feels refreshing.
Ayanar says that these types of mud houses can stand for several decades, and more Indian architects should be using these materials.
People think it's a simple mud house, that it has no life in it and can't last long. They think cement is long-lasting. But when continuously exposed to sunlight and water for 10 or more years, cement can wither and become loose. But mud houses breathe in the hot air and expel the cold air, which doesn't stagnate inside. As a result, these mud houses can last a long time, even up to 75 years.
Ayanar believes that the impact of this construction can extend beyond just one house.
Since these houses absorb heat, the plants around them benefit from the cool air. We've seen that plants around these structures need much less water compared to plants around a concrete structure.
He hopes that clay houses will help people fall in sync with nature once again.
Creating a building to show the viability of sustainable construction. That's the aim of a project in Berlin. The circular house will be built almost entirely from waste and reused materials. As an innovative model, the residential and office building intends to prove that the principles of a circular economy can also work in construction.
Welcome to one of the most innovative co-working spaces in Berlin. Inside and out, it was built with second-hand materials. A wooden booth was once an artistic installation by Yoko Ono. Now it allows you to make phone calls and work undisturbed.
Even this door is made of recycled plastic, and we've reused it here for the second time.
The materials for these lockers came from an exhibition at Berlin's Berghain Club. And the sofa set was salvaged from the trash from an old office building.
We call builders, we see a demolition site, and we see what we can reuse.
The upper floors are still under construction. The circular house is being erected on the site of a former brewery in Berlin, built almost completely from construction waste.
The vision behind the circular house is to show that circular or sustainable construction is possible. It hasn't really been done in this way before. The building sector causes 40% of global emissions and 60% of global waste. Our goal here is to show that we can build differently for the future.
Building began in 2019 on a place of community-oriented living and working. 3 floors are being added to the brewery's former warehouse. They will house office space and 8 apartments at rents that even less affluent people can afford in Berlin's tough housing market.
People from marginalized groups can find living space here. That means people who are shut out of housing because of their origin, skin color, or income. The mutual added value here is to be able to experience this diversity and to really create space for it.
As much material as possible is intended for later dismantling and reuse. Most is screwed together rather than glued, interlocked rather than cemented, and natural materials are used which can later be composted.
These are simple wooden walls with straw as natural insulation. Then it's all just plastered with clay.
The Impact Hub has already moved into the ground floor, a co-working space for social and non-profit enterprises. One of these is the startup Jobs for Refugees, which places refugees in the German labor market. There were practical reasons for moving into the circular house.
There are people here who do work like ours. They may be concerned with other social issues, but are perhaps facing the same fundraising challenges, for example. We need public funding, and we can get support and expertise from other social enterprises that may already have faced the same questions.
Building a house from recycled materials requires clever material sourcing. The startup Concula, also located here, finds and acquires building materials from condemned buildings. From lamps and hardly used kitchens to glass facades and intact elevators.
As a platform, we're probably most like Tinder, a supply and demand matchmaking platform bringing people and material together. The idea that you build forever and then tear it down again after 10 years because it's cheaper, we believe that's no longer sustainable.
It sounds like a simple concept for the future of construction, yet the sector is struggling with the reusable approach.
For one thing, the mindset really isn't there yet. For another, planning takes much longer and the logistics around it are completely different. And that also leads to increased prices.
But the founders of the Circular House are convinced that sustainable building can and must work because resources are finite.
Conserving these finite resources and emitting fewer pollutants in the production of construction materials. Those are the issues we have to solve in the near future. As the need for new structures continues to grow, the challenge will be to build them in the most innovative and eco-friendly way possible. I'll leave you with that and see you again next week. Goodbye and thanks for watching.